We start with the travel chaos. Whose fault is it?
Well, I think it's a combination of everyone's fault, but it's quite clear the government have been asleep at the wheel. I think yesterday the Transport Secretary was spending most of his time phoning around Conservative MPs trying to get them to support the Prime Minister than doing the job that he's paid to do. But it's quite clear that the travel industry has been in trouble for some time in terms of trying to recruit staff. And we were saying a way back last year, when restrictions were being lifted and furlough was coming to an end, that those industries that were hardest hit and longest to recover needed more support and didn't get any. And this is the consequence of that.
Didn't they?
Not directly into making sure that they could skill up workforce, that they could retain the staff that they require, that they were paying people properly. And look, the airlines take a huge amount of responsibility for this. There's no doubt that, for example, British Airways, who were hiring and were firing and rehiring, and all the issues they've had over the last few years with pensions, it's very difficult to recruit staff when you're doing that to your own staff at those times. So there's blame apportioning everywhere here, but in terms of the government's role, they need to bring people together, they need to step in and do what they can to help. My own airport, Edinburgh Airport, are asking the government to not relax the rules in terms of security to go airside, but to make them quicker so they can get staff onto the front line as quickly as possible. So everyone needs to come together here now to try and resolve this problem, because families' holidays are being ruined, and we can see that from the pictures on Sky over the last few days.
You mentioned Grant Shapps and what he might not have been doing yesterday. We heard from Dominic Raab, who's deputy this morning, the Prime Minister's deputy, saying there's nothing to see here, everything's fine.
Well, everything's not fine because the government's paralysed by this issue and have been for the last 5 or 6 months now. And you see the report also today from Lord Geidt, who's the advisor on ethics to the Prime Minister, who got his job because the previous incumbent resigned over the Prime Minister whitewashing a report into bullying in the Home Office. He's saying that the Prime Minister's ridiculing the ministerial code, that he has to come out and explain why he doesn't think he has to resign because he's broken the ministerial code. All of the things are just dominating our politics at the moment when you have travel chaos and when you have a cost of living crisis. It's the worst in a generation.
Yeah, but the government's come up with £15 billion to try to help with that, is what they would say in response.
Well, they would, but it's too little, too late for many, and every penny is obviously welcome. But they've actually had to come up with the ideas that they've been ridiculing Labour for since January, when we came up with the windfall tax on the oil and gas companies to help people with their energy bills and to do everything they possibly can for the cost of living crisis. But you can see what's happening at the moment. Everyone's spending their time in government trying to defend the Prime Minister. We may or may not have a leadership challenge next week. We've got a Prime Minister who's really a lame duck, and the only way to resolve any of this issue is for the Prime Minister to resign and to replace him with someone who can bring integrity back to the office. I mean,
he's come up with 15 billion quid, which is more than Labour had suggested when you were asking for the windfall tax, and he's also being lauded by the President of Ukraine.
Well, the country's been at war before, involved in wars before, and changed the Prime Minister. But we can see that this isn't dominating our politics. There is no integrity left in Downing Street. You can see that from the Sue Gray report. And what the Prime Minister wants to do is to drag everyone else into that political gutter with him, so he can say that, look, everyone's the same and therefore I'm just the best of a bad bunch. That can't be allowed to happen. Keir Starmer's made it pretty clear what should be happening with the Prime Minister. And whilst he remains in office, the entire integrity of our politics is diminished.
I'm glad you brought that up. Former Director of Public Prosecutions being basically questioned under caution.
Well, there's been accusations made. Don't forget the Durham Police said last February that there was no case to answer. They've now opened a new investigation. They're going through the process of that. They'll come to a conclusion from that and any sanction that may be required. Keir Starmer's perfectly confident that he was abiding by the rules. He is clear about that. He was 350 miles away from home during an election campaign in a constituency office, having something to eat. It's all been pretty clear what the case is that he has laid out, and he says that it's up to his own integrity, but also the integrity of our democracy, that if he's given a fixed penalty fine like the Prime Minister got, he will step down.
But nevertheless, I return to my original point, which is he's the former Director of Public Prosecutions and he's being questioned under caution.
Well, he doesn't think that he's done anything wrong. The police are duty-bound when accusations are made to investigate. They are investigating. Part of that investigation is to send a questionnaire to the people involved. Do they fill out that questionnaire?
Not always. They only do that if they think there's a case to answer.
Well, they're investigating the accusations that have been made, mainly from much of the media and indeed Conservative MPs who've made these accusations. So the police have already
just to be clear, are you suggesting that it's the media's fault that he's in the position he's in?
No, I'm suggesting that they started the story for the reinvestigation. The police are then duty-bound ground to open an investigation to reassess this. They're doing that through the processes, and Keir Starmer's been pretty clear he doesn't think he's broken any rules, and if he has, he will do the decent thing and he will step down. And that's not just because he's leader of the opposition and believes in our integrity in our politics, but because he has been a former Director of Public Prosecutions.
And it didn't help that Labour lied about whether the deputy was there or not.
Well, I don't think it was a lie. I mean, lie's doing an awful lot of heavy lifting there. This was an event that was happening in Durham. There was a schedule of attendees and there was a schedule of what was to happen there, and everyone's pretty clear that no rules were broken.
But we were told that she wasn't there and she fundamentally was there.
Well, to categorise that as a lie, though, is quite strong.
She was.
Well, a mistake, and people weren't sure who was there. I mean,
it's all on the sheet.
It's all come out now, and people have said, well, look, the investigation will now happen. These sheets that you talk about, incidentally, are no smoking gun. Every single visit from any shadow cabinet member have a schedule of what happened.
They must have looked at that and made a decision to say that she wasn't there when she fundamentally was.
On those sheets, it also said quite clearly what the COVID rules were and compliance with those COVID rules. That's pretty clear because it's in the public domain, which shows that this was a pre-planned work event. The stopping for food was part of that pre-planned work event, and the COVID rules were part of that schedule. And that's why I think that the police will come back and say that there's no case to answer. And Keir Starmer's quite confident about that. But he has said, and I think it's right for him to say this, that if he does get a fixed penalty notice like the Prime Minister did, he will stand down because he believes in integrity in public life.
Why do the good people of Glasgow not want to have Jubilee celebrations, do you think? No parties at all?
Well, I don't know, and it's great. In my own constituency, there's roads closed everywhere over the weekend for people to have street parties and come together. Yes, it's the Jubilee, but it's also a great opportunity for, after 2 years of COVID and lockdown, for people to celebrate with their neighbours, to come together, to socialise, to bring their children together. I think it's a great thing for the country to do. People can make their own decisions if they want to celebrate the Jubilee, but isn't it just a great excuse to get people back together again after the last 2 years?
Would you celebrate a Ukraine victory over Scotland tonight?
Well, that's a very difficult question. Probably not. I mean, I wouldn't be as disappointed ordinarily in a Scotland defeat perhaps tonight, but I do want Scotland to win. But I think it'll be a wonderful occasion. I hope the occasion is marked across the world for what it is and sends a very strong message to what Putin is doing in Ukraine. But I won't be as disappointed as I would perhaps normally be, but I do want Scotland to win this year.
OK, it's good to talk to you. Thanks so much, for joining us. Thank you.